I've set myself a challenge. I want to build my family a garden room using salvaged materials for under £500. This will be the cheapest, most sustainable, and I believe most rewarding garden room project you're ever likely to see, and also probably one of the most labour intensive. For over 6 months now, I've been on a mission to find free and low-cost building materials with this build in mind. You won't believe some of the incredible finds I've managed to get my hands on. I want to show how you can achieve some amazing things on a tiny budget with some creative thinking. This is the area of the garden where I want to build the garden room, so I needed to remove some shrubs and a couple of small trees. This took a few hours, and I knew that the most tricky part was going to be removing the tree stumps, but I had a trick up my sleeve, using a reciprocating saw to cut through the roots, which made life much easier. Yes. I then need to try and get the ground flat, which is going to be the time-consuming part. I need to make sure to leave a distance of 1.8 metres from our heating oil tank, just to make sure that we don't contravene any regulations. And the building's going to be 2.4 metres wide. It'll be 3 metres deep, and I want a 600mm gap at the back, so I'll place this at 3.6 metres. A friend of mine loaned me this plate compactor, which is going to help compress everything down and flatten the ground. The petrol-powered compactors, which I've used in the past, tend to be much more powerful than this, but for DIY work, this electric one is good enough if you're using it on things like soil or sand. It's important to elevate the building off the ground so that there's no build-up of moisture which can ultimately rot the floor. And I'll be using some salvaged paving slabs to do that, and luckily back in the summer I managed to find these ones at the side of a road with a free sign next to them, so I picked them up and these are going to be perfect for what I need. I had lots of ballast left over from a previous project. This is sand with some gravel mixed in, and I'm going to use this to bed my slabs down onto. Ideally, I'd have used hardcore for this job, but regular viewers will know that A, I like to make use of the things that are already around, and B, if I can avoid spending money, I usually will. If I'd had some cement to mix in with this, I could have made a nice dry mix which would have set nice and firm. It'll still be fine though, I'm only really going to be using this because it'll be easier to screed it nice and flat. It will also help fill any low spots in the ground, and it'll help with drainage. This got a good going over with the plate compactor too. I cable tied a long batten to the bottom of my spirit level to extend it, which made life easier when screeding the sand flat and level in all directions. And then it's in with the slabs. I'll be using these 450 by 600mm ones to support the shed as they have loads of surface area. Levelling these was not a fun job. It's the sort of job that you can waste hours on trying to get it perfect. If it's just a few millimetres out in a couple of areas, that's good enough as far as I'm concerned. Things are going to settle a bit anyway once there's a heavy building on top, so it was a case of do your best and get on with the rest. I decided that I could use the smaller 450mm square slabs to lay a path round to the back of the garden room. I'm mainly doing this to prevent weeds from growing in this area so that I can access the back of the garden room for maintenance purposes in future, but also I might end up putting a water butt behind there. The last couple of slabs needed some cuts to fit around some concrete at the bottom of this fence post. I'm laying the slabs with a slight fall away from the building so that water drains away. And then I brushed some more sand into the gaps to help lock everything in place. When it rains, it'll wash it down and I can just keep adding more. On this particular day though, the forecast said it would be a dry day. However, shortly after doing this happened. So I could get some more sand in there sooner than I thought. Now there is one area of this build project where I am going to allow myself to bend the rules, and that's because I want to use pressure treated timber for the floor bearers. These are going to be close to the ground where they're more likely to rot, and it's not easy to find long lengths of pressure treated wood salvaged. These lengths though were left over from when I built my brother's shed last year, and I think I've got just enough to do the floor. This is 63 by 38mm timber. It's good practice to have floor joists spaced apart 400mm on centre, and with my joists positioned like this, that's basically exactly what I've got here, which is nice. However, this space and this space is more like 450. But I think I'll be able to get away with that for two reasons. Firstly, I can add lots of reinforcements, and secondly, because of the floorboards that I'll be using. More on that shortly. So with the bearers placed, I can measure up for noggins, for which I can use some of these offcuts. I'm using 90mm galvanised nails in my framing nailer. And then I'm measuring for the longer noggins. And I'm going to place these 600mm apart using a story stick to position them consistently, and that's because I'm going to be adding some insulation to the floor next. I managed to get all this salvaged PIR insulation from my local reclamation yard. It's a bit tatty, but at £64 for enough to insulate the entire building, it's a bargain. These sheets are 3 metres by 1 metre and 30mm thick, and it'll help keep the building cool in the summer and warmer in the winter. I'm using that story stick again to mark up the size, and I can make all the cuts using a utility knife. All the repairs can be done with some foil tape, and any holes were taped on the underside and filled with silicone before adding more tape. To make sure my insulation never falls out of place, I'll add some offcuts of batten with some galvanised nails. I'm not entirely sure this is necessary, but it will give me a bit of peace of mind. I wanted a nice tight friction fit with no gaps. And I used more foil tape in an attempt to create a continuous vapour barrier over the entire floor. And then in with these longer pieces. Now on to what is certainly one of the most exciting finds of this entire project. This is solid oak tongue and groove flooring. A lucky find on Facebook Marketplace back in summer last year, and I couldn't quite believe my luck. These boards are 22mm thick, which is going to make for a really solid floor. There were lots of holes to fill though, and thousands of small nails in the grooves too. And because these boards have moved over time, I knew that the existing tongues and grooves on these boards were unlikely to seat together well, especially with them being full of tiny nails. So to get around that, I decided to make some cuts to each board so that they lap over one another, which will be much quicker than pulling out all those nails. So with an old blade fitted to my saw, I used a test piece to help set up my cuts. And then I could make those cuts to enough boards to cover the entire floor. To fill the holes, I'll cut some 12mm plugs. And then I used a step bit to drill the holes out to 12mm. There were also some ugly knots that I want to fill, so I mixed some India ink with some wood filler and by splashing some water on I can get an idea for how they will look once finished. I also added a couple of coats of varnish to the underside of the boards, and then I stored them outside to acclimatise to the UK winter. Speaking of which, here we are at the end of January, ready to fit the boards. It's important to get the first board fitted nice and square to the floor structure, and I'll butt the ends of the boards up together over one of the bearers so that the ends of all of the boards are fully supported. Because these have been outside, albeit under cover, all winter in high humidity, I'm expecting these boards will only contract from here rather than expand, so I'm going to fit them relatively tight together, and I expect the gaps might open up more in the summer. I'm using 50mm galvanised nails here. I'm also staggering and randomising where the joins are for aesthetics. In some areas I used clamps to take any warp out of the boards. Some of the boards are long enough to span the entire width of the floor, so I put those in randomly too. This is the last board going in, because at the front of the garden room I'll later be adding some decking, which will be covered in a future episode. Before moving on to sanding the floorboards, I used a nail punch just to knock down any nails that were protruding. And then I used a tool that is new to me. This is an orbital sander, not a random orbital sander, an orbital sander. It removes material incredibly quickly, a bit like a belt sander, but it leaves a nicer finish. I might do a video about this tool in future. I went through quite a few discs, but the oak looked amazing. And I'm going to add a coat of water-based varnish to help protect it. This will get another coat once the garden room is complete. Because these boards were a little bit warped and twisted, this floor was never going to look pristine and perfect like it would have if the boards were new, true and freshly milled, but I'm very happy with that. I want this building to have loads of character, and in my opinion, this floor has got heaps of it. So then, a pretty good start. I've spent £77 and I have a fully insulated solid oak floor. Not only that, but I still have loads of those oak boards left over. I know there will be some doubters in the comments section, so I'm just going to show on screen now the marketplace listings where I got those materials, and I'll try to remember to do that in each video going forward as well. Obviously I did bend the rules a bit with those floor bearers, but I think it was the right decision to use pressure treated timber there because I really want this garden room to last. In the next video I'll be framing the walls and the roof, and I'll be trying out a new method for preserving timber outside. Thank you for watching.